Hello and welcome. I'm Alex Proimos, Head of Institutional Content and Investment Magazine, and this is Market Narratives. This show is a series of unorthodox conversations with thought leaders influencing the world of fiduciary investors. For more related insights and analysis, please remember to check out our website, investmentmagazine.com.au, and subscribe for a free email. And with that, please enjoy this week's episode. My guest today is Nicolette Rubinsztein, who's a director of Super Ed, UniSuper and Zurich Australia. Welcome.
Thank you, Alex. How are you?
Very well. So earlier this year, we had you as part of the Conexus Financial Retirement Conference, and you were talking a lot about sort of how to build a happy retirement. Can you give us a little bit of a background in terms of when you think about happy retirement, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, sure. I think the realization for me was actually having spent my career in looking at the financial side of retirement, how much more there was to the picture than just finances. And in fact, that realization that finances actually, are actually a very small predictor of happiness in retirement. So it's been actually a bit of a personal labor of love. Done a lot of reading, a lot of thinking about happiness in retirement. And, again, the kind of aha moment was how much it's actually the softer things that drive your real enjoyment level in retirement. So things like your purpose, whether you feel like you've got a purpose in life in retirement, your community, your relationships, your sense of belonging. That's sort of all foreign territory for your typical actuary, particularly. And the other realization that I had was really about spending a lot longer in retirement or living a lot longer than I had otherwise expected. And I did one of those I actually did a few of those longevity calculators, and it predicted that I was going to live to 100 and beyond. And I've ended up reading a lot about longevity, and I've just actually finished another book by David Sinclair called Lifespan. There's every possibility that we will, many of us will live beyond 100. And, it's a new problem that we've got as a society. How we're going to spend sort of these latter years, how long we're going to work, part-time working, flexible working, and how we're going to be happy. And one of the statistics that really stood out was from a Harvard study, and they categorized this cohort of Harvard graduates I think they were from the 1930s, and they categorized them in retirement according to whether they were happy, well, sad, sick, or prematurely dead. And only 28% of them were categorized as happy well in retirement. And for a bunch of Harvard graduates, isn't that a very, very depressing statistic that such a small proportion are happy well in retirement? So, anyway, a lot to think about how we focus on the non-financial side of things, as an industry as well.
Let's stick to the happy well sort of piece, right? And we always talk about money not buying happiness and so forth. What do you feel is sort of missing for a lot of people when they get to retirement? Is the drive of sort of work, the 9 to 5 grind, it sort of gives people meaning, and then the whole stopping and going to retirement is just maybe too much for a lot of people?
Yeah, I definitely think that's one component of it, this purpose. They say that the people who do the worst are actually in retirement are often people like doctors whose whole sense of self and sort of reason for being is so closely tied to their occupation. But that could be said for a lot of occupations, by the way. If you think of academics or even politicians, that sort of thing. So, spending some time on what is your purpose in retirement is a really good thing. And I've, as part of this whole journey, I've come across a couple of people in our industry who've now sort of moved into that area of helping retirees and pre-retirees work out what their purpose is going to be in retirement. And I think that is a very fruitful and rewarding place to be. And the other angle on it actually is relationships. So people who are not good at building relationships or don't have a happy partnership with somebody, that's the other source of really sadness in retirement. Another one that this Harvard study picks up a lot on is actually alcoholism. And, they looked at what are predictors at age 50 of people who will not be happy in retirement. And, drinking a lot at age 50 was, a kind of very significant predictor of kind of being sad, sick in retirement. So, so go easy on the wines.
That's probably not great advice. Some people must be listening thinking, geez, that's is a bit of a worry for themselves. But, I guess this whole COVID environment has particularly with people being working from home and their lifestyles changed dramatically. I think for a number of people, it's given them a chance to reflect on what's important to them. It may have even given a bit of a pushback on the whole consumerism and the need for constant entertainment, because a lot of traditional entertainment hasn't been available. So hopefully there is some benefits from this environment to actually get people to sort of think about, well, how to be active and actually how to, reflect on your life and what makes you happy.
Yeah, I mean, I've personally loved this isolation and lockdown. It's my whole life has slowed down, and I've loved spending time with family and family dinners and games and more exercise and, meditating. The reality is there's been a couple of different segments, and there's a couple of segments for whom it has not been an enjoyable experience. And anyone with small children was, if you speak to them, it's been very tough. Anyone with any kind of mental health issues as well, I think it's been hard, especially if you're lonely. We have to be very cognizant of these different segments. Overwhelmingly, the boards that I'm on, we've been seeing surveys of staff, how they're going, and it's amazing. Overwhelmingly, there's a lot of support for working from home. And I do think there will be a step change in working habits from now on. There's a lot of evidence about the business benefits of working from home, and I'm not just talking about property saving costs on your rental costs, but actually in terms of employee engagement. One study I saw showed that for every hour of working from home, employee engagement rises up to a maximum of about 2 days a week. So it's quite feasible that employees, you can justify it in a business case that employees can work up to 2 days a week, I would say, from home is very feasible. But it's got to be very carefully managed, because the other thing that we've learned is that online meetings work in limited circumstances, but they're definitely not a panacea. And I can't see us really embracing online board meetings for longer than we have to. So we do need to get people physically back together, which means that this whole working from home cannot be a whole free for all. I think we do need days when most people are back in the office, because physical connection does work best.
Oh, look, that's absolutely the case. I think, it has worked so well for a lot of businesses because your people, you've been working with them for months or years. So you've got that sort of that relationship already built. And so Zoom just is a way to sort of catch up as a temporary method. But as a business grows and needs to hire new people, I can't imagine how you sort of hire people and they're just always so far away. They're always so distant. So I think that is definitely a big change that will it will happen in terms of working from home being available, but at the same time, there needs to be this ability to get everyone on the same team, so to speak.
Yeah, I agree with that It's sort of worked over a few months because we've got those existing relationships and we've got that trust. But it's not going to, it's not going to work forever. And, as soon as those relationships break down and that trust is not as strong, it won't work. And, it seems to work. The online meetings seem to work for, if you've got 3 or 4 people on the line. But if you've got 10 to 20, they can be quite awkward and stilted, and I think a lot goes unsaid.
Oh, look, and the same people that dominate will dominate. That's just sort of how it goes. And there has been some benefit. I know I've spoken to a few asset owners and asset managers that have said that they've seen more of a democratization of information, because rather than having things happening in the water cooler or the kitchen or so forth, because of these sort of more regular catch-ups, information is shared more freely, and it's available to everyone. So there's positives and negatives that come from this arrangement.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of positives actually, and that's one of them. More people get heard. Interestingly, in one of my companies, productivity has gone up, and in one sort of operations area, and also service levels have improved, which is again something that you wouldn't have expected. Another benefit has been talk of whether we actually need a BCP site going forward, because the change to working from home has gone more seamlessly, and now it's a proven capability. So I do think that it's opened up a whole realm of possibilities actually. So there's no doubt that life will be different.
So let's take the conversation back to sort of the broader retirement piece. And we sort of talked about sort of the happy retirement angle. We talked about sort of the change in life now that's happened because of the COVID crisis. There's obviously been a lot of change that's happened around retirement, particularly because the government has allowed for early access. Curious to get your thoughts on sort of how that's evolved and sort of the thinking behind it.
Yeah, I mean, I have supported what's happened. I think, administratively it has been hard, but it's a very unusual situation. And I do believe that, unusual times require unusual solutions. And when people don't have income, we know what the ramifications of that are. So I think that it has been the right thing to do. Obviously, the massive issues in the superannuation industry has been the level of illiquid assets. From a UniSuper point of view, our liquidity levels are actually, our level of illiquid assets are a lot lower than a lot of other funds, and actually are in that first round, the number of our members requesting access was lower than we anticipated as well. So it's gone, relatively smoothly from that point of view.
Yeah, curious on your thoughts around sort of, we had early access and yes, it was designed to sort of help address sort of a short-term issue in the market and the economy really slowing down. But at the same time, it feels like the industry has spent a very long time trying to get members engaged and trying to encourage them to put more and more money into their superannuation so that they do have this retirement pool they can then rely on. And now we've sort of got them engaged for what I would maybe consider the wrong way, which is the ability to potentially withdraw funds.
Yep, I agree. That's an issue, but it's a little bit like publicity. Any publicity is good publicity. Maybe any engagement is good engagement. The longer that I've worked in the industry, the more concerned that I've been about the lack of understanding of what our members have in their superannuation accounts. Some of those statistics about how many members understand that they've got life insurance in their super. Now, funnily enough, that has actually changed quite significantly over the last couple of years, so that's good. But it just goes to show you that level of understanding and therefore engagement is a lot lower than you would want it to be. And I think the older I get, the more I support intelligent defaults in our super system. I think that is the best way of caring for our members.
It's interesting, when you talk about sort of this default system, but at the same time, there's a lot of questions out there about sort of default systems and whether we need to have really more tailored solutions for everybody. Because, a default is typically designed for a particular fund. A fund sort of looks at its median grouping and then creates the default to it. But then you've got this whole spectrum of people that are maybe only 18 years of age and some who are 65, and they're all in the default. Do we need to do a lot more work in terms of trying to create more tailored solutions for each individual?
Yes, but possibly not in the way that you're anticipating. I personally feel that the product side of things is largely there. The investment options are available, the insurance options are available. To some extent, to a lesser extent, the retirement options are available. And I personally think that a lot of the development in the next 10 years is going to be in that digital interface and tailoring solutions to individuals more through that digital interface rather than the end products. I think they're largely good and suitable, and it's actually how we interact with our members in a really easy way that is the area that needs development.
So does that mean that we then need to sort of look at new sorts of approaches in terms of advice? I know robo-advice has been available. There's been a lot of discussion about sort of financial advice. Does a lot more work need to be done there to sort of engage people at the right times to look at their super and maybe switch things as need be?
Yeah, I think it's partly robo-advice and partly just sort of broader digital engagement, for want of a better word. So it doesn't necessarily have to be full-blown advice. And I think robo-advice is part of the picture. But I also think, face-to-face advice is very much part of the picture too. And having a bit of both is even better. And one example that I've seen work quite well recently, and it's in its very kind of embryonic form, but is a super ed product called Retirement Essentials. Their age pension concierge service is what it's called. But it basically helps people work out whether they're eligible for the age pension and then helps them apply for it. And that's all done online, and they upload, input their data and their information and their assets and their income, and it then helps them with the forms and helps them liaise with Centrelink. And once you've seen that kind of process, which really can drive a lot of retirees completely nuts, once you've seen it done quite simply and using digital solutions, you kind of see the light and you realize how much more is possible. And I think the same can be true of, somebody approaching retirement. And you could have an intelligent default in a super fund. But by just asking them a few extra questions, whether they've got a partner, whether they've got a house, maybe getting them to input some data about their assets and income levels, you can provide a much more tailored default product, if you like, based on their circumstances. And a lot of that can be done online. And there's no doubt that a sort of extra half-hour face-to-face conversation with someone at the end of the process just to fully explain things, might need to be part of that. But I can definitely see how that can work.
Mm-hmm. Let's take it to the point of getting a pool of money, right? There's a lot of things in terms of advice through the system, and a lot of advice has been focused on the back end as people approach retirement. What's maybe missing on the early stages to try and get people, engagement's one thing, but also increasing their super contribution, or at least making sure that they're on the correct pathway to have a pool of funds that can provide for their super.
Yeah, I think a number of funds are going in that direction quite well. And, again, I think it's as simple as some information on their statement about what their projected benefit is or projected income level in retirement. And there was actually, might have been about a year ago now, but an academic paper using the CBUS data that just showed how effective that was in terms of engagement. And, we talk about how much members know about our funds and how much what they read and what they don't read. But it does look like their statement is the one thing that they do look at. And to the extent that we can communicate clearly on that, I think that's a very good option. But I also think, by the way, that we are fighting against human nature. And, you don't have to look far in terms of behavioral economics, but it's just human nature to not think about the long term. We avoid it. We don't like doing it. There's a certain type of personality that will think about these things, but a lot of people won't. And that's why I come back to the intelligent defaults probably being the best option for a very large chunk of our membership.
I have another suggestion or an idea to ask in terms of sort of building people's long-term vision. Sometimes I think for super, it sort of feels too nebulous for a lot of members. They don't really understand what they've invested in. They know they've got some shares, they have some bonds, maybe some infrastructure. But is there potentially an approach for the government to maybe create more of these infrastructure projects, which the super is effectively buying into? It's much clearer. And so people have more of an engagement in terms of what they own. They've got something that they can reflect on, whether it's a toll road, whether it's maybe the Sydney airport. Is there something that's missing there?
I do think the act of storytelling is a very effective way of engagement. And to the extent that, you can have meaningful investments that do help, sort of convey that meaning, I think that's good. I just reflect on how busy we all are in a day-to-day way, when you've got children and a job and, is anyone really going to, in their 30s or 20s read that newsletter? It's challenging.
Oh, absolutely. I guess it was more sort of if you're driving down a particular toll road, when you pay that exorbitant fee for that use, sometimes you feel, okay, hold on, it's going back into, my funding for my retirement at some stage. Something that can help trigger people to feel that there is that growth. They've got that, it doesn't have to be a tangible piece, but they can really sort of connect up to where their money's going.
Yeah. Well, I think, absolutely. Tell those stories and engage in that manner. But there's a lot of research that suggests it's actually around, people's 50th birthday. Those trigger points as to when you really start thinking about retirement are 50th birthday, when you pay off the mortgage, and I think another one is actually when you stop paying, school fees. And I think, trying to engage before then is, it's like defying a law of nature kind of thing. It's tough.
Well, there's an interesting point there where you talk about sort of the 50th birthday being that turning point and the ability for people to pay off their mortgage. There seems to be more and more research showing that a lot of people haven't paid off their mortgage by the time they've even hit retirement. So, is there something that maybe the banking sector or the government needs to do in terms of trying to make sure that people aren't, held up with such large debts as they approach retirement, and then they use their retirement savings to reduce that debt burden that they may have?
I think there's definitely an awareness piece of work there. The last time I looked at the stats, they weren't as worrying as some of the media reports implied. So I think about 25% of people when they retire do still have debt, something like that. But the amount of debt was relatively low, and it was sort of, I think it was on average, I can't remember if it was $10,000 or $20,000, something like that. So, there's definitely, that's a skewed distribution, and there will be higher amounts. And again, I come back to digital solutions there, because as we, interesting, during COVID, we've seen the benefit of the ATO data and their ability to, see across the multiple super funds and hold that data and liaise with the multiple super funds. We've also got open banking now, and all of those things mean that the digital solutions, we will be able to target those messages like you've just mentioned around, people who are 60 and still have a sizable mortgage. They theoretically will be able to upload their banking data into a, some sort of robo-advice, online advice, and generate a statement of advice and piece of advice telling them what they should be doing. I can see, significant change being possible just in the next 10 years in terms of being better able to target that. And, you come back to this engagement, and if it's specific to me, I'm much more likely to engage in that messaging.
Mm-hmm. So it's really a two-way data process of sort of you providing more information about your financial situation, and then, with a reciprocal approach from your fund to then sort of give back, okay, given this and this detail, you need to either reduce your debt, or you need to then contribute some more to the fund and so forth, just to try and keep people sort of really on path as they get to their official retirement date.
That's right. I mean, you can imagine the power of having, your fund information, whatever the ATO is holding, and your banking data, and, being able to sort of pump that through an algorithm and generate, a piece of advice, that having all of that data together, that's pretty much your whole financial situation in many cases.
Mm-hmm. Let's sort of move up closer to the retirement date. There's obviously more and more Australians hitting that point. One of the bigger issues that's sort of a societal issue is sort of the intergenerational fairness of the system. And there are a number of people that are in their 30s that probably say, well, I'll never receive a pension, so I'll have to try and hope for the best that I'll get there, versus people that are now coming up to retirement who feel that yes, they've saved some money, but then they can still rely on the pension. What's your view in terms of how to maybe try to address some of the intergenerational issues that maybe some people have around sort of the pension system that we have today, so that it can continue and still provide a safety net to people going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I do think there are intergenerational issues, but I always point to the intergenerational report itself, and when that projects forward even to 2050 and beyond, a large proportion of the population are still getting a part or full age pension, and I think the number's about 70% still getting a part or full age pension, even that far out. So if the government's own modelling suggests that, I think that's what should give the average Australian the most comfort. And it is true to say that far fewer are on their full age pension, and a much greater proportion are on part age pension. But that safety net is still very much part of the forward planning.
As we think about the safety net, I guess, how do you think about sort of the a traditional full pension that you receive? I'm assuming it's around 30,000, 32,000 tax free. Is that correct?
Yeah, for a couple.
Mm-hmm.
The way I think of it is that it would be difficult to live on that, and that we need to top it up to something livable. And, that's why I've always been in favour of some sort of longevity protection, be it in the form of a lifetime annuity or a deferred annuity, but just enough to top that up to something livable. And, in its simplest sense, that is buying an annuity of $10,000 per annum to take that up from $30,000 to $40,000. And that just gives you that peace of mind. This issue that a lot of our retirees are being too frugal, and they're ending up, when they pass away, they still actually have fairly large superannuation balances in a lot of cases, and that's really just being used as an inheritance, which isn't what it was really designed for. And I think if we have that, if we create that safety net, then people will feel a lot better about spending their money in retirement and spreading that spend, rather than holding on to their assets because they're so worried about how long they're going to live and outliving their money.
It's a really interesting piece where people they get fearful and they decide to save more and more, and obviously with the the number of people that are moving into retirement, their saving is actually going to be a drain potentially on the economy more broadly. So the government needs to encourage people to spend and also to take pressure off the financial system. Is there any ideas that you can think of? One thing is not leaving money to your children, which is always controversial, and there's always been this negative light around estate taxes. Is that particularly a way to maybe make sure that people do spend what they have first, and then rely on the government as the social safety net later?
Yeah, I think there's a number of carrots and sticks, and I have been a bit influenced by the kind of work of Thomas Piketty on inequality, and intergenerational transfers are a big contributor to inequality in our society. And interestingly, particularly property that is passed down the generations, but superannuation as well would be. So, I think equality in society is a very important thing to aim for, and for us to, a very desirable goal. And there's a lot of untoward consequences of putting its estate taxes and death taxes in place. So I won't just kind of dismiss those. But certainly encouraging people to spend their money in retirement for the reason that they were given the tax deduction in the first place, I think is very important. And I think the first step towards that, probably before you do anything like estate and death taxes, which I am open to, by the way, but the first step is this retirement income or retirement covenant, and basically getting trustees to design a retirement strategy for their funds. And that's not just a product. Product is often the foundation of it, and thinking about longevity protection and that sort of thing. But, I think it's a broader strategy. It's around segmenting your membership and seeing who's going to have an adequate retirement and who's not, seeing what their projected benefits are. It's about how you're going to engage with those members. It's about what advice offer you can offer those members. And it's about intelligent defaults. So I see that as a very broad retirement strategy. It is product, it is engagement, it is segmentation, it's advice. And I think that's probably the first step. So I'm very supportive of that.
Have you looked into reverse mortgage? I think it was Australian Super that looked at it about 3 or 4 years ago. And there has been this conversation that swirls around in the background about people unlocking the value of their house because they're very asset rich, but don't have the cash flow. Is that something that maybe it should be a government system that people can take some money out of their house that allows them to live, and then the government gets paid back when on the sale of that property?
Yeah, I think given the particular characteristics of the Australian market, which is that we do have a disproportionately large share of our wealth held in our property, that very much is part of the end game. And there already is a government solution available, and I'm trying to think of its name, but I can't remember it. But again, it comes back to the engagement with the member. And historically, those reverse mortgages have had they've had a very tarnished reputation, not just in Australia, interestingly, in different parts of the world. We do have to be careful with how we engage with members on this, and it can be very controversial even within a family unit, because there will be children that are expecting inheritances and that sort of thing, and if they realise that it's sort of being chewed up in a reverse mortgage, that can be problematic. So, but I do think that is part of the solution, and I again think that kind of digital engagement is part of how to bring that to the member. But that absolutely should form part of how some of our members receive their retirement income.
So last question, I thought it'd be a controversial one, and for some cases, people will find it very hard to retire because they won't have that money. And if people are living to 100, does that mean that we now need to sort of assume that we should be working to 75 or 80?
Yeah, I think we do. Funnily enough, both of my parents are now, my mom's 76, my dad's 78, and they're both still running their own businesses, admittedly working part-time. But I absolutely think we need to rejig our expectations. And it's a very individual decision, actually. There's some people who literally cannot work longer, and there's others that can work a lot longer. And there's a lot of, there's a big chunk of people who never want to retire at all. We have to have a flexible system that caters for all of those. But, I'm certainly expecting to work into my 70s and probably my 80s, actually.
Well, it's an interesting place to finish the conversation, because we actually started with the whole premise of happy aging, taking care of our well-being and mental health. And so now we get back to sort of the situation where we may end up working till our 70s and 80s. So thank you very much for your time today, Nicolette.
No, it's been a pleasure. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you for joining us. All views expressed on this podcast are subject to change and do not necessarily reflect the views of Conexus Financial. This podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be relied upon as investment advice.